Hignet's corner, beyond Bent. Janssen! And Blackburn Rovers are 18 minutes away from a Premiership return.
As far as Stewart, just outside the penalty area, clips it central for David Dunn. David Dunn equalises! It just had to be. Dax corner and it goes. Glance towards goal! And Rovers have taken the lead! And Charlie Mulgrew has scored his 14th of the season. It may well be the goal that sends Rovers back into the Championship.
Hello Rovers fans and welcome back to another edition of On The Other Side live with me, Ryan Hildred from Rovers Chat. I'm in a slightly different location today, slightly darker than it usually is, but it's on the other side as it always is. And it's the final game before a pesky international break as Rovers travel to the Riverside Stadium to face Middlesbrough in the Tony Mowbray derby tomorrow afternoon. And I'm delighted to welcome Tom from the Borough Breakdown podcast. Thanks for joining us at short notice, Tom. How are you this evening?
No worries, doing well. Thanks for having us on.
Good stuff, thank you. And I'm just getting used to this environment around me, as I say, a bit darker than what I'm used to. It's not the usual things I've got, but we'll make do. And Rovers fans, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, of course, please give that subscribe button a hit. Please like this video as well and turn on all notifications using that bell icon. We've got Super Chat available as we always do. And we always say a big, big thank you to our sponsors, Blue Rose Capital and sixyardsout.com that you can see at the bottom of the screen there. And obviously we are raising money this year for Sporting Minds UK, our chosen charity as well. So thank you to everyone there. So Tom, you're coming in really cold for this one. So thank you, as I say, for answering the questions. Let's make a start on the video. And for me, we have to start in one place, and that's the manager. He's obviously a Football League stalwart, Neil Warnock, with a good history of promotions under his belt as well, with 3 at Championship level. And I'm just really intrigued to get the Borough view on Neil Warnock, first and foremost, given that you're now going into your second full season with him. So what's the view amongst the fans about Warnock and the job that he's done so far?
I think he's still well liked. I think everyone can appreciate what he did when he came in. He came in with about 8 games left in that season with the massive break because of COVID. And it looked for sure that Woodgate was taking us down. First match back after that, we lost to Swansea. Warnock came in, completely turned the season around, saved us from relegation. Last season wasn't the best to watch. I think we all kind of accepted it was a transitional season. And, you know, mid-table was a finish at the start of the season everyone would have been happy with. I think as soon as we got to January, we were kind of around the playoff area. And then we signed like Balassi, Cabano, people like that. So expectations went up a little bit. So people were a bit more disappointed at the end of the season. But the first couple of games of home games of this season, it's been generally a really good reaction for Neil Warnock. It's the first time he's played in front of Borough fans. There's been a lot of Warnock give us a wave shouts and stuff like that, which, to be honest, I've not seen since Karanka was our manager. Obviously, Pulis wasn't that well liked to want for people to want to give him a wave. And Woodgate, I think, probably started off with the best wishes of everyone, but it kind of went downhill quite quickly. So I think at the moment, everyone's still quite happy with him. The style of football is completely different now to what it was a couple of years ago. I think a fair few people are getting frustrated with his attitude towards a few of the foreign signings that we're making at the moment. He said Paero, who we signed from Banfield in Argentina, might not be ready for a few months. And we were linked with Mitchell van Bergen, who's today signed for Rennes in France. But last week he was kind of saying, you know, it's nothing to do with me, but for his signings, you can absolutely tell that his signings, because he won't stop talking about them in press conferences. Ollie Burke today was one where he said he liked him, but you know, in that press conference last week with Van Bergen, he was kind of the opposite. But I'd say that's the only kind of frustration with him at the moment. Like I said, we can all appreciate the job he's done and completely turn the team around, really.
Yeah, and the signings and the style of play I was going to ask you about in a moment. But I was just doing a bit of a bit of research into Warnock's record over the Championship over the last 20 years, and just thinking about Borough's aspirations this season. And if I just bring up the little graphic that I've done here, because it's a really intriguing one. So this is, hopefully everyone can follow this. We've got his time at Sheffield United on the left, then we've got Crystal Palace, QPR, Leeds, Rotherham, Cardiff, and then obviously Middlesbrough. And if we just look at that graph, Tom, apart from his time at Crystal Palace, he does have a good record of improving league places, and obviously indeed that promotion that he has got with QPR, Cardiff and Sheffield United. Now, we know the expected top four this season in Fulham, West Brom, Bournemouth and Sheffield United. They look strong. But outside of that, I think it looks pretty open. So with Warnock's record, with where you are at as a club, is the expectation for you to make the playoffs this season?
I think it is, at least, yeah. Since around February or March last year, Warnock's been talking up this season about promotion. He's been telling players like Johnny Howson since last year, like, you're going to enjoy this season. You know, we're going for promotion. I think around that time last year, you know, we can be fairly cynical and just say, is he just saying this to sell season tickets? But also it has continued during the summer. We had a lad from Oldham on trial, Dylan Bahambola, and he got sent back because apparently Warnock had said to him, we're going for promotion this season and you're not going to play as much as you need to in this stage of your career. So all the noises from the club are saying promotion. And I mean, to be fair, we mentioned this on our podcast last Sunday. Compared to the last time we went up under Karanka, our record this season, I mean, fair enough, it's only the first four games, but it is actually identical. I think a lot of people were frustrated after Derby last weekend, seeing that as a game we really should have won. But then putting some perspective on it, it's like, right, we didn't need to win all four. You know, it's early days, but I think it's just more frustrating that we didn't beat them. So yeah, I think, like I said, that's the aim for this season. Whether or not we'll see it through, I don't know.
Yeah, and another thing I just want to bring in here, I've spoken to 4 fans now on this show just about squad depth and other things like that. And obviously Rovers, we featured that as well. And if I look at your squad, it looks quite large compared to most. And indeed, you've made 8 signings, which I'll just bring up on a graphic in a moment. You know, teams like West Brom, for example, have got a really tight-knit group of players. So if the playoffs are the aspiration, if you've got a good manager in Warnock, you know, how do you think that the squad is shaping up? Do you think it's a good enough squad to do it? I'll just bring up the transfers as well.
I think we're a few signings short. I mean, it's good to say that after 8 signings as well. But if you look at, say, Ikpeazu there, the third one in, he is our only striker at the moment. We've got a youth striker, Josh Coburn, who Warnock actually said in his press conference today, like, up until, you know, the start of the season, we wouldn't have even considered him as an option. But he's really impressed in training the last couple of weeks, and I think Warnock is looking at him as a legitimate third choice striker now. But we don't have a second choice striker at the moment, so he is, you know, de facto our second choice striker at the moment. We do need another winger. At the moment, our only kind of real bright spark on the wing is Isaiah Jones, who had never played in the first team up until Fulham. But I mean, he's done well. He's got 3 assists in 4 games, and he has really been our only creative outlet. We've had no one on the other side. We signed Sammy Amiobi, who seems to be injured, and no return date given at the moment. So we do need another winger there. We were going for, as I mentioned, Mitchell van Bergen, but he's went to Rennes. I think we're going after a lad from Belgium called Jean-Luc Dompe. I think that's how we pronounce it. I must admit I never heard of him up until last week, so I'm not entirely sure. But we've got 2 different kind of long-term plans of our transfers at the moment. So I think he's tying into the club's long-term vision for transfers rather than someone who's going to come in and make an impact straight away. And then finally, we need another left-back as well. We've got Mark Bowler at left-back, who's come on leaps and bounds since Warnock's came in. There was a game a couple of years ago against Leeds where they absolutely walked through us and won 4-0. And you looked at Bowler in that game and think he's done. He's never playing for us again. But he's come back in. He's turned it around completely. And he must be kind of one of the first names on the team sheet now. However, it's the same as striker. We don't have another left back, so if he gets injured, we're screwed really. So one link that's come up this week that we're apparently looking into is Joe Bennett on a free transfer. Just left Cardiff. Warnock knows him well, and of course he knows Borough well as well because he came through our youth academy. So that's probably one I can see happening. But long term, in terms of the squad, it looks better than last year. We're still getting injuries around the same couple of players, but we seem to have a more reliable core than last year. And we seem to have more going forwards as well. As good a reputation as a striker as Britt Sombolonga had, he didn't contribute as much as what it looks like Uche Ikpeazu and Matt Crooks have done in the first 4 games so far in terms of bringing everyone else into play.
It's funny you mentioned Joe Bennett because Chris makes the point here. I think Rovers and Borough have been linked with the same players all summer. So there has been little rumours about Joe Bennett and Rovers. It'll be interesting to see if Middlesbrough do that one. I just want to stick with the squad, Tom, if I can, because I look at those signings. Players like Bamba and Peltier obviously bring that solid experience, and Warnock's obviously managed them before. Ikpeazu and Crooks, you've obviously mentioned the better players for relegated Wycombe and Rotherham last season. But the one that's snuck in there, I think, is the signing of Martin Payero. Until I researched Middlesbrough, I hadn't realised this signing had gone ahead. But, you know, he's a 22-year-old Argentine international, represented Argentina at the Tokyo Olympics, signed for a fee believed to be up to £6 million, which is not a small fee given what the Championship clubs are currently doing. So it's, obviously you mentioned how Warnock's been treating him. You know, how has he looked so far in the small amount that you've seen him? And ultimately, what has he been signed to do for you?
In the small amount I've seen him, it's been hard to judge because it's only been kind of 5 minutes at the end of the game. Apparently, Warnock was speaking to Steve Gibson a couple of weeks ago and said he might not be ready for a few months. And Gibson was kind of like, well, it took Juninho 3 months to click. However, I was a little bit too young to remember this at the time, but a lot of people have said Juninho was starting most games at that point. So it's going to be interesting to see how Payero progresses. He's done enough in the small amounts we've seen him to look like he has got something about him. He's got good footwork. He's got a decent engine he can run. And he's got a decent long free kick as well. He seems to be kind of more of a deep lying playmaker when we've looked into him and to kind of see what type of signing we were going to be getting. But he's been given the number 10 shirt, and when he's came on, he has been playing in that advanced midfield position. So it seems like that's the type of position that Warnock's going to be using him in this season. Whether or not that happens long term, I don't know, but that seems to be how Warnock wants to use him.
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does. And I did think about the Juninho comparisons as well. And I wondered if Borough fans would be thinking about him in those terms. So yeah, interesting to see how he'll do at Championship level. And we've obviously seen lots of South Americans rip up the Championship by storm before. You know, probably the most recent I can think of is someone like Hal Pedro for Watford, for example. So we'll see how he gets on. So if we move on to the match itself then, Tom, fairly similar starts for Rovers and Borough. Rovers have got 2 wins, a draw and a defeat. Borough have got just the 1 win, but 2 draws and just the 1 defeat as well. So how are you rating the start so far for Middlesbrough?
Probably about 6 out of 10. Could be better. The game we had last Wednesday against QPR kind of really exposed some problems for us. What we've noticed on the podcast from the first few games is that we stuck to a really rigid man-marking system, and it just didn't work well against QPR at all. QPR, the first 45 minutes, we went in at the break 1-0 up. We pressed them really well. QPR didn't have an answer for about 25 minutes. After that, they passed it around really well, but they didn't really create much. And then in the second half, they pretty much walked through us about three times. After the second one, we went up and got an equaliser. And then it was like, the thing I likened it to was when someone's like, batteries have died in the controller on FIFA or something, and the defence just stops working because QPR just walked through us and put a third in. So that really wasn't great. But then it seemed like we shored it up a little bit against Derby last weekend in terms of keeping a clean sheet. But then also Derby had far too much possession, could have scored. Joe Lumley made quite a few decent saves. And we didn't really create enough going forward. So it seemed like one extreme to the other between Wednesday and Saturday. Against Fulham and Bristol City, it did look encouraging, but after those two games, we do need to see improvements this weekend.
Interesting, and we'll see how Rovers do if we do have the ball and see if we can obviously take advantage of what QPR did. And if we just look into the stats a little bit, then I know it's only 4 games in a piece, but Middlesbrough quite low down in the possession stats, both home and away this season. Got an average of 42.5% at home, which is the 21st in the division, 41% away, which is the 19th. And then that's similar to Rovers, actually. We're bottom in terms of home possession, 38.5%, and away, 39.3%. So both sides, 4 games in, haven't had much possession of the ball. Rovers have really been, as fans, we've been quite impressed this season with our ability to just dig in a bit more. We had loads of possession of the ball last season, but didn't really do the digging inside. We've dug in really well and got some good results away from home this season without that possession. Warnock, of course, is known for that digging in. What has the style of play been this season? Is it the Warnock that everyone will just know?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a completely different style of play to what you'll have seen from us when you played us last season. As I mentioned earlier, Britt Assombalonga and, the other strikers that we had, Chuba Akpom, Ashley Fletcher, they don't put in the same amount of effort as Ikpeazu does. Ikpeazu has been signed really as a hold-up target man. And I mean, one thing that's been particularly impressive about him against Bristol City, he actually held off 4 players at the same time and passed it off to someone. So you can see just how strong he is. But the only thing about him is he doesn't seem to last kind of past 60, 70 minutes. And then you'll have Matt Crooks going up front, who's about 6'5" anyway. So it's the same style of play, but Matt Crooks doesn't stop running. So it is a very different style of play to what we had last season, where we were just kind of hoofing it over Assombalonga's head a lot of the time. What you'll probably see is that we'll try and move it out wide to Isaiah Jones and likely Marcus Tavernier if he plays, but he's been in and out of the side with injury recently. And then we'll be trying to cross it into Crooks and Ikpeazu. What we have noticed this season is we're getting a lot more people in the box for these crosses, which was a disadvantage for us last season. Whereas we were putting crosses in, but we had like one person in there and it was going over the Reds and no one was running at the back post. Now it does seem like it's been coached into them for as many people to get in the box as possible. But like I said, on the other side of things, the first 4 games, we've kind of seen a really rigid man marking system, which hasn't really worked that well. So you're likely to see that down the other end as well.
The crossing into the box will be interesting because I must admit, we had West Brom last week and they are a big side. They've got the likes of Kyle Bartley and others. And every time they came forward for a set piece, I was really worrying. We have got Daniel Ayala, who of course, and Lenihan and others who are good in the air like Sam Gallagher. But it just felt like West Brom might just have had one more number than us and could have maybe taken a bit more advantage of that. So will be interesting if Borough do get those crosses in the box tomorrow for how we do deal with that. So with all of that in mind, just a couple of other things, Tom. Last season, obviously Warnock was furious with the challenge on Dial Fry in the first half. Branthwaite obviously injuring his eye, and it looked like a penalty, obviously a Stonewall penalty. We obviously robbed you of the victory there. And then that QPR game that you referenced, which felt like a bit of a ding-dong battle. So with those 2 things combined, I think Warnock's going to be smelling a bit of blood tomorrow, just kind of getting that win before the international break. What sort of game are you expecting?
I mean, I think he will be trying to get the win. I mean, purely because, like I said, he's going for promotion this season. I'm not sure how much of a grudge he holds in terms of that tackle or refereeing decisions. I think it was mentioned in the press conference, but if he holds a grudge against every referee as a go at, that's every referee in the EFL and possibly some of the Premier League referees, I think. So I'm not entirely sure on that one, but I think it's probably going to be a game he's looking at as something to build momentum before the international break. One of the things he was saying in his press conference today was it's kind of based around the transfers and what we're going for at the moment. I think he's more looking ahead to Tuesday, after the transfer window, and he's like, right, this is the squad I've got to work with. So he's going to be wanting to build momentum to take into that and then really assess things kind of mid next week and kick on from there.
Now, before we, what we usually do on this show, before we usually do go live, I get the guests to do their predicted 11, but obviously you filled in at really short notice here. So I might just have to read you the side that Stephen did send to see if this is a side that ultimately you agree with, just as a bit of a predicted 11. So he's gone for a 4-5-1, Stephen, with Lumley in goal, the back four of Dijksteel, McNair, Fry and Bowler, Housen and Morsey as the two holders. With then Crooks, Jones and Tavernier behind Ikpeazu. Is that the sort of side that you think that we'll see tomorrow at the Riverside, or could there be a couple of other changes?
I think there might be a couple of changes in there. One of the things we talked about on our podcast last Sunday was where McNair's best position actually is. We do think it's in defence, but more in a back three than a back four. McNair and Housen both haven't been too impressive in the times we've seen them this season. And we'd probably prefer McNair to be in centre midfield rather than that other centre-back. So Grant Hall might come back in there. Could see McNair stepping into midfield, which would mean Housen drops to the bench. Ideally, what we'd like to see on the pod is Payero with Morsey and Crooks either side of him, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen with Warnock saying it's going to take months. So I'd say that midfield and defence, with those couple of changes that I mentioned, are probably the more likely what we're going to see tomorrow.
So no Payero on the bench, you're thinking, tomorrow?
More than likely, I would think.
Be interesting to see him on. I think he is the type of player, if you are thinking of playoffs, he could be the difference maker. So I'll be interested to see what he looks like coming off the bench. And just as we move towards the kind of, the final throes of the show and things, Tom, in terms of your side, who are going to cause us some problems tomorrow? Who should Rovers be looking out for?
Ikpeazu and Crooks for sure. As I mentioned, we've started playing not so much long ball because it is going across the floor as well, but knowing that Crooks and Ikpeazu can win flick-ons and also Ikpeazu can hold the ball up really effectively. And what you're going to see from that is us trying to switch it out wide to Isaiah Jones. Like I say, is our most creative player so far this season. So you should be looking out for him. And if he plays on the other side, Marcus Tavernier, we kind of dubbed him the Championship Iron Robin on our podcast last season because he's got a habit of cutting in from that right-hand side and hitting shots with his left foot, curling towards the far post. So I'd look out for that as well.
And if there are areas of weakness where Rovers could hurt you tomorrow, what should we be looking to do? Where can we hurt you?
Centre midfield, I would say, based on the games I've seen so far this season. Like I say, on the pod, we've not been too impressed with McNair and Housen's performances in midfield this season. We're big fans of Sam Morsey, and we'd prefer to see him in the team because he effectively cuts off passing lanes in centre midfield. But there was a couple of occasions against QPR where, like I mentioned, we would stick to this rigid man marking and pressing, but Housen and McNair looked more tired than anyone else on the pitch. And they'd be jogging towards people and not get within 10 yards of them before the ball had already been passed away. So that's where I'd probably say the weakest part for us has been this season.
Interesting. We'll see if Rovers can exploit any of that, Tom. Absolutely. We'll see how we get on. And just before we get into the predictions, obviously the transfer window is still, of course, open. You did mention that your squad doesn't quite feel like where you want it, but it does look like a squad that looks larger than most. So firstly, are you expecting those incomings, either those that you mentioned earlier that you've been linked with or others? And with the size of that squad, are you expecting anyone to leave to make way for those players?
I'd be shocked if there wasn't any incomings. It seems like we've been after a striker from Sporting Lisbon for a couple of weeks now, MIDDLESBROUGH, who seems very likely to sign. He's just away on international duty with Slovenia at the moment. There seems to be something going on in terms of quarantine and stuff like that. Apparently, he'd have had to quarantine if he was in Portugal, but not going to Slovenia for the international break. So it's a bit weird, that one, but would expect that to be wrapped up soon. As I mentioned, Joe Bennett is a possibility on the left-hand side, and we'd be expecting to see another winger come in, which at the moment seems likely to be Oliver Burke from West Brom. Oh, no, it's Sheffield United, I think. So that's who I'd expect to see come in. And I think at the moment, Warnock seems to have a bit of a habit of pulling something out of the bag on transfer deadline day as well. He seems like the new Harry Redknapp, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him on Sky Sports on his bike outside the training ground or something, giving an interview like Redknapp used to his car window. But in terms of outgoings, I wouldn't expect to see many now. Everyone who we thought might go out has already went out. Coulson's went to Ipswich. Lewis Wings went on loan to Sheffield Wednesday. Chuba Rakpom just went on loan out to PAOK in Greece the other day. And I don't feel like there's anyone else who might go. Potentially Dejan Stojanovic, who is wanting to leave as well. But he's not figuring in Monarch's plans at the moment. And he was very, very much our third choice keeper. So we wouldn't kind of see that as a great loss if he did go. But other than that, I wouldn't expect to see anyone else go out.
Hayden Coulson's an interesting one. He scored in one of the last games I saw before the pandemic ruined everything, that 1-1 draw. So interesting to see how he'll come along at Ipswich, of course. Now, Tom, Rovers fans know what we do at this part of the show. I'm going to push you for a score prediction and put you on the spot. So Rovers fans, please let us know how you think the game will go tomorrow and what your score prediction is in the comments, whilst me and Tom have a go at our predictions as well. So Tom, I'm going to go with you first. You know, what's your score prediction? How do you think the game's going to go?
I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I can't see Borough keeping a clean sheet. But it's like you mentioned earlier, we're also a side that digs in and doesn't give up when we go behind. And I think last year we were up there with the teams that got the most points after going behind. And it still seems to be a bit of an attitude that we've got this season, where if we go behind, we do tend to dig in and eventually get another goal. I can't see us keeping a clean sheet. I'd obviously love us to win, but I think more realistically, a 1-1 draw.
1-1 is what my prediction is as well, actually, probably for similar reasons to you. I think it's going to be a fairly ugly game. I do think Warnock is going to have the side fired up. You know, he doesn't forget grudges, and we did mention that on one of our preview shows earlier. I think that incident last season will still be in his head. So I think he'll have Borough really fired up for this game. There's obviously the Tony Mowbray factor as well. Daniel Ayala on the pitch. There's all these things. So I think it's going to be a rough and tumble type game, but I think, as you say, I think both sides will dig in. I don't think we'll have enough to get the victory, but I do fancy us to get a draw. So I'm saying 1-1 as well. Rovers fans, you've got about a minute to get your score predictions into that comments box before we close this stream. We've had a couple in already. Dizzy, thank you for joining us as ever from down under. He is going 1-1. Chris, good on you. You've gone 2-1 Rovers. Diaz and a 90th minute Poveda winner. There we go. Just taken Poveda on loan, Tom, from Leeds United. Crooks to score for Borough. Warnock to get a red card. Well, if he is as fired up as I said he might be, we might well see that, Chris. And then Naive Steve has gone 1-1. 1-1 to Rovers. I don't know if you're having me on there, Steve. You're also going 1-1. So I think, unless anyone comes in, Alexander, we've got a few coming in now. Alexander's gone 1-1. I agree, but I'm hopeful of a 2-1 Rovers victory. So it's got the feel, hasn't it, of that game just before the international break, where you don't want to lose. You just want to go into it feeling fairly positive. And I think Rovers would absolutely take that points haul that we've got. 2 wins, 2 draws and a loss. I think we would have taken that before the season started. So it's got the feel of that type of game. And Luke's coming in with a 1-1 prediction as well. So that seems to be the consensus. Luke's gone for 1-1 there and all. So there we are, 1-1. So that's it, Rovers fans. So Tom, I just want to thank you for stepping in at really short notice on behalf
no worries,
of
anytime.
And do you want to just give your podcast a plug? As I've got you here at short notice, you might as well plug the podcast.
Yeah, sure. So we're a weekly Borough podcast. Our slogan, all your match day chatter in the pods. There's 3 of us who do it. There's me, a lad called Johnny, and Dana, who's absolute stats wizard. It's just a lot of banter every week about Borough. We preview the upcoming games, review the past game. We've got a few different segments in there now. We're working with our local Gazette. Talking to them, asking them Borough questions and getting their input, getting opposition view, and we're hopeful of getting an ex-footballer to give his view for 5 minutes every week as well. So exciting times for us.
Fantastic, and great that you've been able to hook up with the Gazette as well. So fantastic stuff, and it's great when you can obviously produce the content and get recognised like that. So brilliant. Keep up the good work, mate. Thanks, Rovers fans, for joining us live this evening. Tom, you have a great evening and enjoy the game. I'll be up at the Riverside tomorrow, as a few of us are from Rovers Chat as well. Rovers fans, if you're at the Riverside, enjoy the game. If you're not, go and join Ollie Walker-Peel on the watch along tomorrow. He'll be providing that usual content. And then post-match, we'll have our instant reaction and the usual stuff that we now do on a match day, now that we can actually be there. So that's all good, isn't it? So, Tom, have a great evening. Rovers fans, have a good evening as well. We will leave you with our sponsor message from 6yardsout.com. Big thanks to Blue Rose Capital. See you later, everyone. The Rovers Chat YouTube channel is proudly sponsored by 6yardsout.com. They've got retro football from every era with mugs, phone cases and much more. They also have plenty of Rovers goods, including apparel with the famous 94-95 season and this season's kit. Check them out using the link in the description below.